Hi everyone. Um, my name's Ian Brown and welcome back if you're coming back to listen to our webinars after the last couple of weeks, and welcome to anybody who's new. We'll follow a similar format as we've done in the past, where we're going to actually talk about a little bit about the development of children and how you as a parent can benefit from knowing a little bit more about how children develop in a particular way. We'll be looking at their creative development again. And then today what we're going to be doing is we've got probably lots and lots of ideas that may help you in terms of being able to sort of look at the sorts of things like sensory play and some activities, creative arts or visual arts activities that you can do with your child. So I'd like to start today just to talk a little bit about what do we mean by sensory play, and then how does that follow up in terms of what does it mean to be about messy play? Because sometimes if you are trying to Google some of these terms, you'll find that messy play is synonymous with sensory play, and that's the sort of thing. So I've got beside me down here, you can't see them, but I've got lots and lots of bits and pieces that I'm going to talk about in terms of things, again, that you might be able to do at home. And if you're new to this, what we try to do is give you lots and lots of ideas that you might be able to just get from your kitchen, get them out of your kitchen drawers or wherever, and use those with your children during these crazy times. In the last couple of weeks, what I've done is I've used my granddaughter who lives in Sydney. It's about an hour south of, we're about an hour south of Sydney. And she's helped me just to demonstrate some of the different concepts and some of the creative responses that we've been doing. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic here, we're having a few more shutdowns more than we have in the past, and we haven't been able to actually visit her in Sydney. And so what's happened is I've gone to a friend, and so I've got lots of little videos of a friend and her, their granddaughter's name is Felicity. She's much younger than Riley, which is good in a way, because then you'll be able to see what it's like to actually move and do some creative activities with these children who are, she's slightly older than a baby, but she's got different responses to Riley, who's 4, just about ready to go to school. So let's start by just sort of talking a little bit about what do we mean by sensory play, and how can it benefit us? And as parents, what do we need to know on the sorts of things that we do? Now, the idea of sensory play, obviously the word senses is there, meaning that the children are going to be able to use their senses. So that it's not all about, you sort of think about creative arts as being much more about, you know, touch and texture and those sorts of things. But in actual fact, the activities that we're going to be giving you today are a little bit broader than that, because it's about activities which maybe it is about texture, but it's also about sound. It's the sound it might make. It's looking at all of the different senses. So listening to things, feeling things, and seeing all of those senses are coming together in some way. Now, of course, the minute you start talking about textures and things like that, then that's when the word messy comes into it. So we're talking a little bit about that. So children are able to explore their world through play, and today the videos that I've got, you'll see that Felicity actually goes for a walk outside and collects some flowers and things. We'll look at that one later. It's crucial to brain development, because if you're talking about nerves, the development of nerves in children and that connection to their brains that they can actually feel. So if you think about it in the long term, then what you're doing is that you've actually got something like helping children to realize that that's too sharp, or that's too rough, or that texture is soft, or what it might be. So the brain is making these connections as a child's brain is developing. And they're those sorts of activities that you're doing with them. And you will know that it's a natural thing for children and babies to actually grab things and sort of slime things around, whether it's their food and you know, as a parent, you'll know that you put something onto their tongue and they get this sort of reaction where they're actually the texture of it. Sometimes they like the texture of it and they'll grab it straight away, and sometimes they dislike the texture. So this is about the senses. So it does come naturally to babies and children. And because they don't have a language at a very early age, then they're grabbing a lot and they're putting things into their mouth. And it's all about language development. It's all about getting those brains connecting and making connections between those sorts of things. They will soon understand whether something is too hard or too rough or too soft or whatever it might be, or too loud. So if we're talking about all of the senses, we're not necessarily just talking about touch. You know, they will understand the difference between quiet, and they will understand the difference between loud, and they'll cringe if it's loud, so they actually understand where that's coming from. It gives them a chance to explore and investigate. In the last couple of weeks, we've talked very much about the idea that that it's good for children to actually communicate and to be talking and to be working in groups. Last week we talked about the Reggio approach, and the idea there is that they often put children together as a group. Sensory play is an interesting one, because sometimes what happens is that children will focus and they like to actually just play on their own. And I know this from working with young children, I know this with working with my granddaughter, and I know this with working with Felicity, is that they tend to go into a bit of a zone, and they just like to play, and they just like to manipulate and do things like that. So they don't necessarily need language at this point. They don't necessarily need distractions, and they don't necessarily want people around them. They're quite happy just to be playing on their own. That's why things like Play-Doh and things like that are quite helpful. So it supports language development. It gives you a chance, if you want to be able to discuss things with your child. You can talk to them about, how does it feel? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it scratchy? Is it rough? Is it whatever it might be? Or if it's a sound, if it's music, you know, is it too loud, or does it make it feel happy, or whatever it might be? So there's a bit to do with that as well. It's interesting too that these activities that we're doing, these sensory activities, they're sort of the beginning of science technology activities. You know, it gives them a chance to actually start to do a bit of problem solving. It gets them to put things together in a particular way. So the first thing I would remind you of is that if you're talking about sort of messy things, then some of the things that you've got, and what we'll do is we'll have a look at the first video. And then after that, we'll come back and have a look at how do you make a messy activity not messy? Okay, so let's have the first video. Okay, we're coming back to me now, and just make sure it's me. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And I'll just change my screen again. So here we go, you can see me. All right, so if we're going to actually put together some sensory things, we're in pandemic times, we've got lockdown at home, we've got children at home, and we want to actually do some activities. And so far we've done drawing, and we've done some clay activities, and we've done some printing, and all of those things, yes, they've been messy, and there's a bit of control. So what some of the just very quick clues that you might think about when you're doing things like this. The next activity that we're going to show you is most of it's actually done, contained into the container, and that's why it's called a container, because you're actually containing the mess inside this one. So I would suggest, you'll notice in the video that's coming up, is that we cover the table. This is a very cheap plastic covering that you just buy from a party shop, and it's probably the cheapest way to do it. You can wipe that down, cover up the table so that you haven't got a lot of mess. Use containers so that the mess is actually contained in it. And also I would suggest that you're using containers like this that you can actually see through, because part of the sensory activities that you're going to do, color is very important, and you'll see that that comes through in nearly all the videos that we talk about. So that's important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show the next video, and then I'll come back and tell you about how you actually make the sensory play dough that we're using in that one. So can we have the next video? That's video number 2. Hi. Okay, so I put that video together and it's just the first activity that we actually did with Felicity. And you can see that she's not as old as Riley, who was on last week. And you can see that the activity that she did was something that I'd put together into this. And what she was, you'll notice that she was quite tentative at the beginning. She was sort of just taking little tiny bits out like that. After about 5 minutes, it was sort of pushed everything aside, got, you know, puts the colours together, was starting to do sort of sandcastle-y type things where she was building things up. So it was really quite interesting to watch. And you did notice that she sort of worked through from one colour, and then she'd put a little bit more on another colour, and then she'd put a little bit more on another colour. And so what's important here is that you've got her manipulating those materials and then starting to classify things in some ways. So she's actually starting with, you know, one color, and then she went to the next color, she went to the next one. And then it was about, once she was comfortable with the material that she was using, then it was much more hands-on, much more sort of aggressive in the way that she was actually doing things. And that's what you're hoping to do. And then there was a lot of discussion. I've cut the discussion out because what I wanted to do was just to give you a short, brief idea of the sorts of things we were doing. We did that in her grandparents' kitchen, on the kitchen table there, and we just sort of contained the mess a little bit. You'll notice that we didn't use the plastic sheet at this point because we knew that we could just scrape the things together. Now, the materials that she was using is what's called cloud dough. Sometimes it's called moon dust, sometimes it's called cloud dough, and it's really easy for you to make at home. And you know, most of the things that we use today are things that you could actually get your child to help you mix them up, because they're, you know, most of it's actually, you know, it's quite comfortable for them to be using it. So the one that we did today, which is called cloud dough, and on the worksheet that I've sent you, I've got links to all of these. So you don't have to write it down now, but you can actually go and have a look at the link, and it will tell you how to do it. But what's interesting about it, normal cloud dough is just made with flour and vegetable oil. So it's just normal plain flour, you know, that you would cook with use for cooking, and vegetable oil, and you can use canola oil, or you can use olive oil or something like that, but just a vegetable oil would work exactly right. And it's just a mixture of those two. So if you were just making it on normally, you would probably just put about a cup, let me just have a look, just 2 cups of flour and a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. So I use these and we mix them together, so we just get cups of flour, whatever. But the one we've made today is slightly different. So what we've done today is that we've actually put plain flour together, plain flour, and then we've put our vegetable oil, but then we've added something which is called, I know the pack is upside down, but it's actually called bicarb soda or baking soda. So I'm not sure what it's called in your country, but it's just, in Australia, it's actually called bicarb soda. So what we've got here is just, it's a powder, the same as the flour. And what we did to make this one is that we actually put together 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of baking soda and 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. And you mix that together and it becomes like a crumbly mixture that when you squish it together, it stays hard, but then it just breaks up. And that's why it's called moon dust, or that's why it's called cloud dough, because it's not like Play-Doh that stays together. It will actually, but that's what you want. You want that texture to be able to be happening. Now, I'd like to show you the next video. So we're going to have a look at the video, which is on video number 3, just to see what happens as a result of putting the baking soda on. So can we have video 3? Okay, so that we just took that first one a step a little bit further. And what it is that the baking soda causes a reaction, a bit like a science experiment, when you actually add just vinegar to it. Now, what we used, this is just white vinegar, and what we did was we just put it into one of these containers, these sauce containers, and you could see that she was actually adding it in. Some of the videos that you can see where it talks about fizzy moon dust or whatever, they have the children with their hands in it, and I'm not sure that that's a good idea. Vinegars are, you know, we don't want them to actually get vinegar into their eyes. So I would be watching. She could control it quite easily. And you can see she loved it. It was a bit of fun at the end of it. So it's not actually sensory in terms of putting your fingers into it, but it's just a great way to finish. And I'm sure, kids would love it. You'll notice that the colors are really, really pale. And when you're actually putting these things together, you have to decide about what the color is going to be like. If you put lots and lots of color into it, and the colors that we use are just food dyes, all right, the same thing that we'd use in your kitchen, like I said, everything we're trying to find from the kitchen. This is a food dye, and you just put a couple of drops into it. And then you actually just sort of manipulate it with your fingers to actually spread the color through. You can get, I didn't use it in that one, but apparently you can get an oil-based food coloring. I'm not sure in your country what food coloring comes like. You can get a gel or you can get a liquid. What you don't want to do is have your child, with blue hands or red hands for the whole week. And sometimes they'll come home from preschools with little bits of dye on them. They've got also something which is called edible dye, which is called Edicol. And I don't know whether you have that in your country, but in Australia, lots and lots of preschools use an Edicol dye to dye things like pasta or to dye things like sticks and bits and pieces. Bright, bright colours, very, very bright. They're like a hot pink, bright purple. But again, the dye will actually go under your hands. It doesn't hurt you, but it's hard to get off after a couple of days. So she was quite happy. She could tell the difference. Her favorite color is purple, and she kept saying, oh, it's purple, or it's pink, or it's green, or whatever it might be. So she was still getting the colors, even though they were quite pale. So that's just a little bit of fun to do after they've had them manipulating. Now you'll notice also that she cleaned up her mess at the end, and it's important that if you're actually working with children, is that you take it through so it doesn't become all adult oriented and adults take control of these things. We encouraged her to be able to help us clean things up, so she was able to scrape the leftover moon dust that had come out of the container back into a container, and that dust or that cloud dough will last for a long, long time. So if you don't want to do the fizzy one, the fizzy one was just a bit of fun for her with the vinegar. Just use the normal one, which is just flour with a little bit of vegetable oil in it, and that will actually do it. But as I said, the recipes for all of those things are on the worksheet that I've attached as well. So the second thing that we did, because this was a whole activity of sensory things, things we do, and I'm going to show you the next video now. And that's video number 4, and we'll watch that first, then I'll talk to you at the end of that one. So let's have video 4. Okay, so what we did in that one is that you'll notice that because we're talking about sensory play and we're talking about all of the senses and going out, we took her for a little walk. It's spring in Australia at the moment. And so what we've got lots and lots of flowers out in our gardens, and also just in our nurseries, we've got little, what we call potted colour. And so they're little pots that are about this big. You can see behind me, there's some red ones there. And the idea is they're just a little potted colour with some flowers and things in it. And the idea was that we were going to make some watercolour paint, you know, from the flowers. So the whole experience should be not just the whole, you know, I could have made probably a better version of it for her, but the whole thing was the journey of her being able to go out, select some things from the garden, and this is where you have to talk to them about, you know, things that they can take and things that they can't take, you know, because you don't want your plants all stripped the following week because you've done this wonderful activity, but she's enjoyed doing things like that. So what you do is you help your child to actually choose things that she can actually use for her watercolours and other things that she can't. So she went out, selected a couple of plants from there. I bought those little potted plants. They're only about $2 in Australia, so they're really inexpensive. And you could see her actually taking the petals off. And she was able then to tell us all the different colours that she'd actually developed. So, I mean, she's quite good with the colours, but, you know, she kept telling me that purple was her favourite. So she was pulling the purple petals off first. So you'll notice that then there were red ones, which gave us a pink colour. You know, and we talked to her about, oh, the red flowers, now what colour is that? And she'd say, oh, the flowers are red. And then I said, well, what colour is the paint? She said, oh, it's pink. So she was able to see the difference. You'll notice that she put lots of water in it. So what you tend to do is that you actually pull the petals off. And if you put hot water into it, so we're only using warm water with her, and you just use a small amount, and then you just squish up, you know, and crush the flowers together, and the colour comes out into the liquid, and it makes a nice sort of watercolour. You'll notice that there wasn't much colour left. Didn't worry her. She was having a lovely time, and she'd ask whether she could have the purple one, and then she asked whether she could have the red one, or whatever the colours that she had, or orange, which came from this plant over here. And so it depends on what you do, but you can get stronger colours, possibly not from plants. You can get stronger colours from vegetables, and you might want to do that with your kids. So obviously I've got a list of them here. You know, if you're trying to get a purple or a red or a pink watercolour. Now, I'm talking about watercolours because nothing's been added into it except for water, and it will stay on you know, on white paper for, you know, quite a few weeks before it starts to fade off. So it's good fun because it's the process. It's not about just having, I mean, I could go and buy watercolours and let her have a paint, but the idea was that she was actually making it all the way from, you know, choosing and collecting flowers right down to the other end where she was actually doing a painting with it. So if you think about red, pink, purple, then anything like red currants or black currants or pomegranate juice is fantastic for it, or a hibiscus flower, or beetroots, the outside skin of a beetroot. You can actually dye beetroot skins in fabric to make a lasting fabric. So again, you mentioned beetroot, you have to watch that you don't get it all over your hands. If you're sort of looking for a yellow, turmeric, not necessarily a plant, turmeric's a good one if you sort of mix together with a warm water, then it will form a nice watercolour that you can use. Or sunflowers. Again, I'm not sure, it depends on what flowers that or you know, spices and things that you've got there. And I know that, you know, the Middle East, you've got lots and lots of spices. So some of those, you know, mixed in with water will give you beautiful colours as well. If you're looking for green, you can use spinach leaves or artichoke leaves or peppermint leaves. And if you're looking for orange, then obviously carrots are a great one to actually make that as well. Or you wouldn't want to use chili powder with children, or paprika. But it's one that, you know, if you're looking just for yourself, I wouldn't be using any of those strong things with children, but I would certainly be, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really matter if you're not getting a really solid color. You would only want a solid color if it was an adult that was trying to produce something. They quite enjoy just those pastel-y colors and those, you know, and she was having as much fun painting and talking about the colors that she'd actually mixed, you know, and then as I said, she'd taken it all the way from the collecting the flowers right through to doing those. So let's have a look at our next one that we've got, another video that I've put together for you, and this is video number 5. Okay, so on our on the website, I think, you know, from quite a few weeks ago, we put on something which was sort of a self-contained. It wasn't part of the webinar series. It was more like a video that we put together where we actually made Play-Doh on that, and I gave you the recipes for how to actually do Play-Doh. Now, most children, if they're going to a preschool or early learning centre, will be using some type of Play-Doh or some sort of clay or whatever it is to manipulate things. I thought just to make it slightly different to what we've done in the past is that I would give you something today which was actually a no-cook Play-Doh. So what we had there, what Felicity was using in that little activity was that she was using, there was two lots of it that we'd actually used. And you'll notice that those colours were actually quite bright. So we used exactly the same amount of food colouring that you would use in cakes and things like that. And we actually put that into the Play-Doh. And you're actually, once you actually put it together, you can sort of manipulate it and squish it around until the colour actually goes through it and it becomes a bit more solid. So you'll notice that that was probably about the same amount of food colourings that we put in the first activity, which was the moon dust one. And you'll notice that it didn't spread very much at all. It was a very pastel-y pale colour. But you'll notice with that Play-Doh that we just made that it was actually quite strong. So that's really interesting. So the Play-Doh recipe is very, very simple. And all it is just flour, 4 cups of plain flour, 1 cup of salt. So I just use normal table salt that you would have in the kitchen. So it's 4 cups of flour, 1 cup of salt. We use something which is called cream of tartar. And I'm not sure whether, I'm presuming that you can actually get that in your country, but all that, you don't have to put that in. What that does is it actually preserves the Play-Doh so it doesn't go off. So it doesn't go all slimy and have the germs and things in it. And then you put, again, a very little amount of vegetable oil, and then you just put some more water to it and mix it up together like a dough, but you don't make it very doughy. You just keep it reasonably dry. Again, those recipes are on the worksheet, and I'll show you that in a moment. So you can actually put those together. If you make a big batch of it, this one has 4 cups of flour, so that would make, you know, quite a lump, and you can actually divide it into, you know, 4 different groups, 4 balls, and then each ball, then you can add 1 different color to it, and you'll have these really nice bright colors that you can use. Now, you would have noticed that she had two lots there. And I did this as a little experiment because I added some glitter to it. Now, glitter is one of those things that there's a bit of a discussion, you know, and some early learning centers don't like the idea of having glitter in their learning centres. And the reason that they don't like it is because they're worried about the environment, because you've got very small particles. They're not necessarily worried about the health of the child. They're more worried about the environment and what will it do when it's sort of washing down drains and going off into the ocean and things like that. So it's an environmental thing that they're worried about. It's generally, glitter is one of those things that, you know, if it's controlled reasonably well, I mean, you just have to keep it away from eyes, and you don't want children to be breathing it in. But once it's actually mixed into the Play-Doh, I did it on purpose with Felicity to actually see which one she was going to go for. So we sort of went, oh, here's the purple one. Oh, and here's a purple one with purple glitter in it, waiting to see whether she was actually going, which one she went for. Didn't worry her. She went for the plain purple one first and thought it was nice that there was a bit of glitter in it. So I don't think they're, you know, you might want to try it with your child just to see, because they might not be overly excited about the glitter so much, because there is a lot of things with glitter on them these days. But I mean, you can put it in, and you can also put little bits of, if we're talking about sensory play, there's lots and lots of recipes that actually put in sort of natural oils or some colouring or some peppermint to give it a smell, as well as giving it the actual texture. So there's some great Play-Doh recipes on the internet, and there's thousands and thousands of them. They all tend to use very similar ingredients. The traditional Play-Doh is certainly cooked on a stove, so it's not something really that children can do very much, but certainly this one, because it's a no-cook recipe, they could actually be stirring it up for us and doing it in that way. So that was a bit of fun, and it was just, and it was a good activity to actually sit back and watch how she handled that one, because that was an activity where she was just very happy to sit on her own, roll them out, make things, squash them down, start again, and play around with them. So it was, as I said, sensory play is not always something where you're going to be actually having groups of children working together. She actually wanted to work on her own, and you will probably find that there's that your child will do the same. They become a bit more focused, and they, as I said, they go into a bit of a zone where they're actually working on their own and quite happily rolling things. And I wouldn't be talking too much to them, just let them actually play with it and see what they can build. And they're quite happy to actually spend a long time building something and then squash it down and then start again. Now, Play-Doh, if you're doing the cooked Play-Doh, it doesn't crumble as much as the one that we were using then. And you can actually put it back in the bag and actually reuse it. And, you know, because it's, the recipes tend to have it so that it'll last for a long time. Okay, so let's go to our last one, because we are running out of time. And let's go to video number 6, because this was a really fun one that she enjoyed. Okay, so this was our final little sensory play activity that we did with her, creative activity, and this is called puffy paint. Now, I think maybe the adults had as much fun as she had, and you'll notice that she's quite happy about the sorts of things that she's doing with it. And what it is, it's a really, really simple idea and great fun, is that all it is just a cup of flour, a cup of salt, and about 3/4 of a cup of water. So what you're doing is you're just making a dough mixture, which is quite runny. And then what I did was I just put some acrylic paints. Just these are children's normal acrylic paints, and I just squeezed into 3 different containers. Just got these type of containers, made the mixture up first, and I got her to actually make the mixture, which was good. She was stirring it around like as if she was doing some cooking. We put it into 3 containers, put 3 different colors into it like that. And then what we did was we just put them into these dispensers. This is one of these Japanese ones that they used when they put their mayonnaise on your sushi. This one was just a sauce bottle, and she was having a bit of fun. Now, what we discovered, and this is what you have to make sure, I let her mix them all together, and what you've got to watch is that to make sure that you don't get any little lumps in it, because some of the little spouts here would just have, and it only happened once or twice, and just a tiny little one, so we just got a little skewer and pushed it through. But why it's called puffy paint is that it stays thick and it dries thick, and it doesn't peel off the paper for, a few weeks later. It might just start to peel off it once it dries, but it will actually have some texture and thickness to it, and what she was doing. But what was interesting, did you watch her that she loved the idea of sort of mixing it together, but then she was doing the little dots on the outside, and she was more excited about doing the dots than she was. But then once she started to actually mix it, it became like a marbling. So the little exercise itself is getting her to actually push through. It's getting her to actually manipulate and hold these things and mix the colors in a particular way, and then end up with some really nice results at the end of it. So it's not a one-off type activity, but because we took her through that process of actually mixing the dough, actually adding the water into it, squeezing the paint into it. I didn't put that bit on there when she squished it, and the blue paint went everywhere. And then she got her little containers and actually put it together. So she's making patterns with it, and she was looking and getting some marbling sort of activities. So that was a great activity, and we really enjoyed that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually open something and share my screen with you very quickly because we're running out of time. So if I go to here, this is the, hopefully you can see this. This is the worksheet that I've got. And if I come down here, I'm hoping you can see this. It talks about today's webinar, the cloud dough, the Visi cloud dough, the watercolor, the Play-Doh, etc. And then on the bottom of it, you've got all of these different internet URLs or connections where you can actually go to those. And if you go to those, it will give you all of the recipes of the things that we've done today. I just want to finish off because I've got 4 minutes left to talk about our last Voices of Children, this week's Voices of Children, and this is week 5. Now, on your worksheet, if you go to the worksheet, you'll see the things that we're trying to get you to collect. So week 1 was about the images of your children's drawings. Week 2 were the ones where your children might be taking pictures of the printing that they did, if you did those activities. Week 3, this is when we used clay. And then week 4 is where we started to get children to take their iPads or their iPhones or their digital cameras, and they were looking up and they were looking, last week we got children to actually look down, and I don't know what photographs we've got. I'm dying to see them once we start loading them up onto our website. So you need to hold on to these. So you've now got 5 different weeks of things. And then this week, this is what we're going to do, is we're actually going to have children looking in. So in other words, you've got to take your child take their phone, take their iPad, take their digital camera, and have a walk through. And this time I thought we might just do it in the family house. So in other words, what we might do is just have a look and see the things that we can look into. What could you look in? You could look into a cupboard, you could look into a toy box, you might open up the pantry and have a look into jars and take some photos of those things. Or you might even look through windows and look there, so that's sort of looking in. Or you might go into your gardens, if you've got gardens or areas where you've got pot plants, and you might look down into the pot plants and see some of the things that you can see. So this week, it's all about looking in, and looking in could be just, and it's quite interesting to see what children will choose. So I'll stop sharing my screen at this point to finish up. Stop sharing. Okay, and so if you're going to take your child on a walk through the house and things, ask them, if I was going to look into something, and I might be looking in like this, what am I going to look into? Am I going to look into a cupboard? Am I going to look into a toy box? And get them to choose the sorts of things. Somebody's got on our chat, where do they find the sheets? So I might get one of my people who are watching to be able to answer that question, because I send the sheets across and then they then upload them for me, so that they'll give you some answers to that one. But so today has been all about using the senses. It's all about lots and lots of 5 areas that you might like to develop with kids. It might be their language, it might be their just touching, it might be listening, it might be seeing, it may be using their cognitive skills where they're talking about things that are rough, things that are smooth, things that are too loud, things that are too soft. It might be about working on their own, it might be their social skills, or it might be working with somebody else and talking in that way. So we're just about to the end of this one. So this was all about sensory. It was all about making a mess and enjoying that mess and learning lots of different things on the way. So again, it's not that process, sorry, it's not that product at the end. It's the process they go through, from collecting the petals to making the paint and then doing some artwork at the end of it. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've got lots of questions. I'm sure my friends will answer that one for us, of where we find the sheets that have got the links on it. And it's also got what this week's Voices of Children is. So this is goodbye from me, and I hope you've enjoyed it.